Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Avocado Gamescast. I'm Merve, and we have a very special treat for you today. I'm joined by the Kappa,
Hey, what's up?
Andy Tuttle,
Hey, what's going on?
and in a very special treat for y'all, a game developer who has worked on titles such as BioShock 2 and The Bureau, XCOM Declassified. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Scott LaGrasta.
Yay!
Hey
I'll,
guys, thanks for having me.
I'll start off. You've never done me first before. I don't know. That's up to a change.
Yeah, usually I introduce Kappa last because he's our editor, and it's like the last author on an academic paper or the and in the credits of a TV show.
Now we got an actual special guest.
Yeah. So how are you folks doing? All trapped inside?
Oof. Yeah. I think it kind of really sunk in this weekend. Weirdly, like more than so far. Like today feels really weird because it's so nice outside. The kids are begging to go out. It's just that weird combination of like spring's finally here with now stay inside. It's really painful today.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's been rough the last few days. I mean, I'm used to being at home because my job has always been work from home,
Mhm.
but it's just so odd not being able to like go to the store,
Yeah,
or like
same.
watch a movie or something. It's just it's getting to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Uh,
it's a weird change even for those of us who have worked from home. Like I work from home too, but it's weird because now everybody's doing it, and you kind of like feel this weird mix of like people who haven't done it versus people who have done it. And like I keep saying, like the people who are this is their first time working from home, they're trying to like prove to their bosses, I guess, that they're still out there doing something. So I'm getting these emails about stuff that's like, okay, well, that's not that important. I don't know why you're sending this to me, but I feel like us
it's
old work from home vets are, this all can wait. Not everything needs to be done right now.
it's almost like psychologically claustrophobic. Like they're
Hmm.
honing in on your work from home territory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I was born into this darkness of working from home.
How are things in Sweden as far as like lockdown type situations?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been some bans in terms of like, don't gather more than, X number of people like they've got going on pretty much everywhere. But I feel like Sweden's a little insulated from it. In just by way of sort of culture. Swedish people tend to be what we in America would call like standoffish. Like they're not rude, they're just not interested in what you have to do. They're like, you're just another person, like that's fine.
For
So
like New
there's not a lot.
Yorkers.
Yeah, I've never been there, but yeah, I'll take your word for it. Well, I imagine New Yorkers being a little more aggressive about how much they're ignoring you.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in Sweden, it's sort of business as usual. But I think it's also kind of we haven't had it very bad yet. But yeah, I mean, the small town I live in has had a couple cases, and um, uh, yeah. But yeah, like I was saying, Swedish people tend to be a little more like they kind of keep themselves or in small groups. So
It's interesting to think of it like that too. Like I'm no doctor or anything, but like Italy's been hit particularly hard, and they're a very like close knit culture.
yeah,
Lots of elderly living with lots of young people, and kind of like mixed living situations and stuff. And like, it's weird to think about how much of this is just culturally affecting people. New
yeah,
York and San Francisco and Seattle getting hit hard, and like I live pretty rural. And I mean, I think we've had two in my whole county, and it was like a husband and wife who just got back from a trip type scenario. So like the realities there, and obviously you don't want to get it to infect anybody, but it's hard to tell my kids, well, there's something that's we're not really sure about that's out there that we have to protect ourselves from when they're not seeing the effects like in the same
yeah,
way that other people are. So it's crazy times. I mean, you really start to feel it, the longer it goes on. And especially when you're talking about things like the more things get canceled, the more it's just like, oh wow, that this is still going to be here for a while.
Yeah. Speaking of cancellations, the two big ones that are relevant for us are GDC, which went virtual, and E3, which has been pretty much outright canceled. Though they say they're going to replace it with a digital event. I don't know what that's
Permanently,
going to
probably.
entail.
But,
Everyone's doing Nintendo
but
Directs now.
yeah,
I'd be okay with that. I don't really. I mean, I've never gone to E3, so I don't know what the show floor is like. But I mean, I've always just enjoyed watching it from home and the videos. I can't imagine spending 3 or 4 hours in line to play a video game that's going to come out in 2 months. That idea has no appeal to me.
Yeah,
I never did that. I never did that in any of the E3s I went to. It was just because, yeah, it's my time on the floor is precious. Because usually I was pretty much working it as well every time. So it was sort of go see what you can. But yeah, I don't know. I don't particularly miss E3.
See, I was a big fan of PAX, and I feel like PAX can really replace, at least for the gaming public, E3, to be honest with you. I've had so many cool experiences at PAX that I don't know if I'd have had them at E3 just based on what I've heard about it, you know? But I mean, I think I told you guys, like, I was sitting there playing, Age of Empires for like an online something or other not too long ago, like kind of like a reboot. It was like an online mobile type game. I was talking to the guy who was, selling me. I thought it was just like some kind of PR guy or something. He's like, no, I was one of the lead designers on Age 2. And you're like talking to people just like that. It just felt weird as a person to get that going. But I mean, I think if anything, E3 can go away. I don't think the average person would really care much, right? I mean,
yeah, I think like as people who are so plugged into it, we care because we watch the pressers, we comment on them, we run a podcast about them every year. But for like the average gamer, they're like, I guess, gonna read, the news about it on IGN or Destructoid or someplace like that.
Yeah.
They're not really gonna watch every presser and like live chat about it and make fun of it with their friends.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft obviously has their own thing. They could just put whatever on Mixer these days and go right through that and have everybody go through there. Feels like Sony's already was out of the E3 game no matter what. I mean, regardless. So if they're not going to show up at E3 when they have a new console, I can't imagine them coming back around, in coming years. I mean, I think my bold prediction when we were talking about it was I think that in the future, I think PAX is going to be the summer place for game announcements. And I think the Game Awards is going to be, if you've got a winter game, and if you're just looking at those two places as kind of like your big game announcements, I think most people would be all right with that. I mean, I just don't know if E3 has a place anymore. If it's been dying slowly for how long. And I had a little bit of a resurgence after they started allowing people to go back, the general public to go back into it. But I don't know. I don't feel the excitement for E3, like from general public people besides us.
So do you think they're going to end big press conferences? I mean, Nintendo's been doing the directs now for 15 years or something like that?
I think it was a real clear sign that Sony was done with it. After they pulled out, or well before this, like the two aren't related. But I think Microsoft has some potential with their, because they have a streaming service anyway that they've been trying to push. So if they're doing their announcements there, I mean, why not? What does being at E3 gain you if you're one of these Microsoft, Sony, Nintendos? I don't think anything, So then you're looking at the different development studios and publishers, and they all have their own little directs anyway. Or I mean, if you're big enough, like Blizzard, you have BlizzCon. If you're, like Call of Duty or whatever, I'm sure they have their own little plans for how to announce stuff anyway. Or you just don't announce it and just release it, which seems to work for lots and lots of publishers too,
I mean, it's important to keep in mind that a lot of these companies maintain show floor presence even if they're not doing like big stage shows. Like Nintendo didn't like pull out of E3. They still have, I think, one of the biggest show floor presences. They just do their direct videos around the same time. And maybe we'll see less of the bombast, but we still see like maybe it just kind of reduces to the show floor. We're not so worried about the pressers anymore, which I'd be fine with. If you think about
it, the press has a million ways to play and see games. You remember that old Ben Kuchera article when he wrote for Ars Technica that he talked about like what it's like to go to like, a press event? I don't know if you ever read that. It's a really interesting read if you ever do read it. But he's like, so like you get in a plane and Activision flies you to Hawaii to a resort and you just go into the hotel lobby and they just got consoles set up for you there, and it's this big boondoggle, with 50 members of the press all playing Call of Duty all day, But I mean, that kind of event, I think, still probably exists and it'll probably go back to that if it doesn't. I just don't know how many how many times, like if you're setting up whole booths and moving people and doing this and doing that, putting people in close proximity, I don't know if it's necessary, you
I
know?
don't know. The thing is that kind of like review event thing is almost kind of, I don't know if it's dying out, but nowadays with games outlets getting a lot more careful about disclosure,
Yeah,
you can no longer like they're going to write up, yes, I was paid to take a trip to Hawaii, and they
sure.
gave me this food and drink in the article, and then all of a sudden that becomes a lot less impactful for the reader because like, well, okay, they're clearly like bribing this guy with food and drink.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, they do that at E3 anyway. Half
Yeah,
those things are parties, you know?
Yeah, I mean the thing I've seen lately has been that like the streamers are like the big people that we call in now. Like I've definitely been at companies that are big at pulling in community members and things like that to in lieu of the press. Be like, well, okay, press is all well and good, but we want to connect more with the community because they have this more organic reach and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, like Ubisoft did, or Massive specifically did an event with bringing people in from the Division. Or the Division community members to like come and play, different builds of the game, different patches and things like that, to get their thoughts on it. Because not only do they have, a big reach in terms of the number of viewers and followers they have, but they know the game and they know, these elements inside and out. And so in a way, it's sort of part focus test and then part, presser in sort of all in one.
It's interesting you mentioned that. Destiny did something very similar, brought in a lot of their hardcore PvP community recently to do kind of something similar. So, I think streamers are definitely where a lot of the focus is right now for not just building games, but like engaging people with games.
yeah. So we know that COVID has had an impact on the convention circuit, but what I'm curious to know is to what extent is it actually impacting game development? I mean, I know that probably quite a bit of game development can be work from home, but maybe you can elucidate what it's impacting, what's not impacting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I don't know everyone's personal experience, but like I've got some friends, and I think a lot of it is there's not as much work from home in the games industry as one might expect, like, and certainly not as much compared to like other tech fields.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people have this expectation that programming is programming, you can do it from anywhere, and that's not always necessarily the case. Sometimes you need physical access to whatever, like in the case of the work I'm doing or other people in similar positions, it's the dev kits. Like
Yeah.
You technically can run some stuff from home, but it's there's no substitute for it. It's sort of emergency procedures only. Like, yes, I have like debugged over VPN on bus Wi-Fi while I'm like commuting home. Like that has happened, but
It's
not
definitely not
something that's
ideal.
not sustainable.
Yeah. So this is probably going to result in a bunch of delays in game releases across the board.
Yeah, I think it probably will, and sort of as you alluded earlier, like the closure of the press events and things like that will also probably, I mean, I have friends who were trying to show things at GDC, for example, and they're like, okay, well, I was going to show my game at GDC, and I live in Europe, and now I've got a non-refundable game or a non-refundable airline ticket to go show my game to nobody. Like, what do I do now? And so there's a lot of, especially indies are hurting. The big kids will, they'll be fine, but the indies will get hurt a lot, I think.
It's an interesting perspective because I think about it with the movies. Like, yeah, of course they're not going to release Black Widow right now. You know what I mean? Like, or but like I hadn't really thought about that with games. But I mean, I think you've seen more and more game release cycles, especially like in the last couple of years, really start to kind of be tailored to, okay, well, we don't want to compete this with this ever since EA kind of shot itself in the foot with releasing like all its games all at once,
Yeah. Remember when Titanfall 2 was sandwiched in between a Battlefield and a Call of Duty?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people are like, well, don't do that, but so it'll be interesting to see if you start to see a little reshuffling of release dates.
I do love that we have
reason.
I love that we have Animal Crossing and Doom like releasing on the same day, where it's like, okay, times are a little weird right now. Do you need an escape or do you need some vengeance? Like, what's your move right now?
Pick your side.
There's probably a lot of people who are fans of both, and they're like actually making a choice between the two, which I mean, that warms my heart. Let's be real. It's actually cool that people can be into both.
Have you seen the memes? The Doom and Isabel crossover
I got
memes?
posted like half of them. I love them. I can't get enough of them.
So great.
I think what makes it work too is that like both sides kind of got into it, a little bit. I think the Doom side a little bit more than the Animal Crossing side, because I think maybe they were a little bit suspicious at first about what was going on. But I think it's kind of funny that at least both companies also got a little bit into it, which is fun, rather than just letting the internet do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it helps that like Doom Eternal is eventually going to release on Switch anyway, so it's not like they're worried about cannibalizing their own success or anything. So it all kind of worked out for the best. Anything else you guys want to mention about coronavirus before we move on to how we're going to deal with it?
Social distancing. This is just like a personal thing, but I've had so many of my friends who are kind of, I got, like a little bit of a bro crew, of friends, and every single one of them is like, hey man, should I buy an Xbox or a PlayStation? Or like, hey, is it really hard to build a gaming PC? Like so many of my like friends who had previously not even been 1% interested in gaming, all of a sudden they're all sports guys and they're all bored out of their mind, so they're all looking for like some kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, man, you can get into it. It's not as expensive or a hard a barrier, but don't expect you're going to be winning in Fortnite tomorrow or anything like that. But I think that's kind of an interesting thing. I think even like Kotaku posted like a "so you want to get into gaming" type article. So I wonder if that's kind of like a social or kind of like a societal thing going on right now, where people are looking for an outlet, and they've always been interested in gaming, but now it kind of seems a little more acceptable.
Yeah, digital distribution sales are going to go through the roof in the next month or so.
Yeah,
are you saying GameStop is an essential employees?
Oh God. I don't even know what to make of that. It's just so I don't know if you guys saw this, and I should add the disclaimer that I can't verify the veracity of this because this wasn't leaked by a games journalist. There's one YouTuber who managed to sneak onto a GameStop Canada conference call between store managers and the executives, and the kinds of things the executives were saying to the store managers like during this crisis, things like one store manager raised the concern that, hey, if we stay open, we're going to be responsible for spreading SARS-CoV-2, and that's going to possibly make us responsible for some deaths. How do you respond to that? And one of the executives' response was, well, you can catch coronavirus just by pumping gas at the gas station.
Man, that's pretty callous. Well, one of them is like you have to do it, and one of them is like you can get that game literally anywhere else.
Yeah,
I
you
think
can get it delivered. You can get it. You can get it via digital distribution. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, that call was rough. I think one of the things they said was, life isn't fair. So like some people are going to get sick, and so deal with it. Basically, it's just so odd.
Like, do they think they make like ventilators? They make, they don't even make video games. They sell them. You can, I don't know that. I've long kind of stuck up for GameStop as just like a concept more than the actual GameStop itself. Like I don't want video game stores to totally go away, which it means GameStops. But it's hard to defend the kind of stuff that they've been saying. I wonder if it's just like a totally tone deaf, executive suite, or if it's just kind of like a fundamental problem with the company.
Yeah, they're so like out of I don't want to say the public consciousness, but they're basically dying. Like I used to work for a video store chain called Hollywood Video, and the way that when I listen to that conference call and just seeing kind of the way that the stores are running now, it really reminds me of the last like year and a half that the video store was open. There's just a lot of really desperate sounding people wondering what's going on, and the corporate won't give them any answers. And the last few GameStops I've gone into, they're all kind of just run by kids, like people in their early 20s.
Absolutely.
Because they're the only ones who understand that will work there. Anybody who's of a certain age knows to get the heck out because, they're not going to be around much longer. And I really feel like if they aren't staying open because they necessarily feel they're essential, I think they're staying open because they know if they close all their stores,
that's it.
They're not coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all just desperate right now, and I think that's why they're staying open and why they're doing silly things. They're supposed to be sending their people cleaning supplies, but they have no money to send people cleaning supplies. So it's all just lip service to the public to make them think that it's safe to go into that store when it's probably.
I actually do have to keep traveling for my job. I do claims adjusting, so I have to go to people's houses all day, But even doing that, like, I can understand kind of where those managers are coming from, because it does feel like, what if I do have this? I don't know about it because, sometimes the symptoms take a couple days to show up, and like I'm passing it to people and I just don't know it. Like it's a level of like almost, it's guilt that you feel having to do this, I mean, the people want you there. They want you to come to their house. They want you to do the stuff. But at the same time, I almost want to tell them, like, are you 100% sure you need this and you need this right now? Because I could only imagine if you were a GameStop employee that you'd be having that feeling almost nonstop. Like grandma comes in to get her kid something because he's bored at home. And, you just want to say, what are you doing here? Go buy this online or go buy a gift card.
Or if you're young working there, like if you're 22, you might still live at home with your parents or your grandparents. Yeah. And now you want me to go work, 8-hour shift at GameStop with, 10 people in the store.
And no hand sanitizer.
No hand sanitizer and no Clorox wipes to, clean the counters. I'm supposed to go home to my grandma. Come on, give me a break.
It's interesting to see like the different reactions from people, because I think there are very, people who are very, empathetic to the fact that this might not be a thing for them because they're younger, but it could be a thing to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or just, people in general public. Yeah. And I really think that companies owe it to those people to be responsible and say, okay, well, we're not going to put that on you. We're not going to make you be the one that makes that choice. We'll take it. We'll say, yeah, sorry, GameStop is going to close for a month, but deal with it, But like you're saying, I think once people deal with it by going online and buying stuff digitally, they're going to never go back, It's
I think this is a big catalyst for digital distribution, for sure. I mean, it's been gaining traction the last 10 years anyway.
Yeah.
I think this is really going to be the thing that kind of pushes a lot of people over to it.
When Microsoft announced Xbox One was going to be online only, like it wasn't, I don't remember if it was. Yeah, I mean, there was like an outcry, and it was a lot of like, but we can't play pre-owned games. This, you know what I mean? And like that was such a big thing on the internet in a way. And then like now it feels like it's completely flipped on them. Where right. I don't see that at all anymore. Like people couldn't care less about.
Right, people are even excited
the
about
culture in gaming was just different 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, another big part of it
understandably
is, so. I think another big part of it is that like, so I mean I used to work at a GameStop a million years ago now, but I think a big part of it was that and again, yeah, this was I guess probably 20 years ago, but like at the time the pre-owned sales were by people who didn't have a lot of money, the kids who couldn't come in and get the $60 or whatever. Like they were there, like, flipping through the PS1 games, seeing what they could get for a couple bucks. And so like, that was the thing that bothered me, when sort of the rumor of online only came up, was that like, okay, it assumes you have broadband, it assumes you have the money for a brand new game and all these things, and that sort of stuff. And so that was the part that bothered me, having been in those stores and seen like, just people who don't have much trying to have some fun. And I was like, man, you can't lock them out. They don't have that much to be, to treat themselves to.
Yeah. I think we've seen a lot of really good, sales come along. Like every week, it seems like there's games for $4 or $5 on, especially the Switch eShop, or free.
Epic's throwing them at you. I mean, if you want a game, boy, have I got one for you. Stanley Parable this week. I mean, geez, that's a heck of a game.
The other big shift is indies have gained a lot of prominence and sell for less than that $60 MSRP, and a lot of them are like hefty game experiences,
right?
And that's also kind of shifted the conversation a little bit. And it's important to keep in mind, like this was 7 years ago, mm-hmm. when like the indie explosion had already kind of happened, but it wasn't to the same extent it is nowadays. And
sure, I guess what I was just saying is just from the perspective of GameStop and specifically that like it doesn't seem like they've got that public outcry to keep their business model existing like they did 7 years ago. I think
whether
it's technology, whether it's whatever, people are like, all right, does the PS5 even have a disc drive?
Yeah,
it does. Okay, yeah. So I mean, like, I think that was a rumor for a while, is that it wouldn't, So I mean, there's a lot
still
of
an idea that there's going to be a disc drive-less Xbox One.
right. Yeah,
Or
Yeah.
not Xbox
For a lot
One.
of people, though, it's a media player too, so they don't want to take out that Blu-ray drive. But we'll see.
yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to chat about what we're gonna play to get us through lockdowns, whether official or self-imposed. In my case, and I guess in Andy's case, official
Yes.
lockdowns.
I'm stuck inside.
Yeah. So, funnily enough, all my friends like back home, all my college buddies back in Canada, they all want to play video games online now. So last weekend, I spent quite a lot of time playing the Master Chief Collection because my buddies wanted to get back into it.
You better be careful here.
So Kappa's a huge Halo fan, and I am someone who really, really likes Halo's mechanics. Even if I'm like not huge on some of the level design choices they made in like the single player campaign, playing like firefight mode with which is like a horde mode with my buddies reminded me just how much fun it is to like blast aliens with those weapons. Because the weaponry in the Halo series, as I'm sure you all know, is like iconic. The Needler has that iconic purple triangle ammo and it makes that iconic noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then like you could hear the noise in your head right now as I'm saying this. And it's like the plasma weaponry, the plasma rifle, plasma pistol. Like the weaponry in that series is iconic for a reason, and it's just so much fun to run around blasting aliens with those guns. With my old college buddies.
Playing online with your friends instead of playing on the couch, because almost all of my Halo experience multiplayer was with playing with like my brothers at home. We would just eat chips and drink Pepsi or whatever.
Doritos and Mountain Dew, you can say
Doritos and Mountain Dew. I'll say it. That was me. But how does that compare to playing it online? Because I mean, can you still? I assume you have headsets and all that, right?
It's so this was like my group of buddies that I'd play with on the couch back in undergrad. So they all lived together, and I lived on the opposite side of campus from them. So every Friday night or Saturday night, I would walk over to their place with either a bag of chips or a bag of cookies in hand, and we'd just open the junk food, and we'd all eat the junk food together, and we'd just play Super Smash Bros. Or Mario Kart or something like that together for hours on end. Like that was my entire undergraduate social life. And now they're all off in different corners of Canada, and they all went to grad school, and they're all like PhDs in engineering now. So now we can't obviously play on the couch together, but we still every now and then get together to play like Left 4 Dead or Payday online. And our newest thing is Halo Master Chief.
Yeah, for back in the day, I mean, some of the fun, even in getting together for like a big Halo session with your friends, was literally the logistics, like who's bringing what, who's got their consoles. Like I remember, I would play with my friends so much. I actually bought one of those like carrying cases for my old Xbox. You know what I mean? So like something that today would probably be like totally foreign. Like, wait, you needed a carrying case? But yeah. I mean, like it was who's bringing what, who's got the cool TV, who's got this, who's got that. That was a lot of fun, but haven't played a lot of it too with my friends online. I think losing out on some of that is a little bit of a thing, but just the fun you can have in Halo, just when random weird things happen, the grenade sticks you and you blow up at a funny angle and everybody laughs about it. It's just a inherently fun experience. And Firefight, I think, kind of puts it all together in a good way where, you don't necessarily have to be the person who's carrying the team the entire time. But it's also the kind of game that you can play and talk and shoot the shit and have fun doing. I think it's a very social experience that still works to this day.
It's literally just Skype with guns for us.
Yes, exactly.
And I like I still miss, being able to hang out with them in person and like punch them in the arm to distract them and stuff like that. But it's as good a substitute as we're gonna get for our old social life, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah. Hey Scott, remember those LAN parties we used to do at Dan's?
Oh yeah, man, those were legendary.
Yeah, we had this buddy Dan, and we would go over to his place. He had this 3-bedroom house that he just lived there by himself or with a roommate, and we would just go over there. I don't know what, like once a year, and just like all bring our computers and play everything. Team Fortress 2 and
Yeah,
Borderlands, like that.
like he was like the first person. I mean, he was an IT guy, right? So he was the first person who we knew who had like gigabit at his home, and he had like he had put network drops and all the outlets. So yeah, it was just
Right, he built
bring
his
up
own
the tables.
server room.
Yeah,
Those were the days. I mean, in some ways, like I do like the convenience and being able to jump in and out with my friends. But yeah, I mean, when you just had to figure out who had the extra network cable so that everybody could play or whatever, it was always kind of a fun experience.
Yeah, so what have the rest of you been playing or plan to play during social isolation?
I guess I'll.
Go ahead.
Obviously a ton of Destiny, but besides that, I don't know. Like I feel like I should be playing more games in a weird way, but I kind of haven't. But the one game I picked up just specifically to play for this was a Samurai Warriors game. I bought Spirit of Sonata, which is kind of the. I don't know. I'm half and half on it. It's like the first Samurai Warriors that they kind of try to add like an actual legitimate story to. It kind of has its ups and downs. You guys know what Samurai Warriors series is all about, right?
Not exactly, sorry.
Oh, okay. So it's Dynasty Warriors, but set in Japan. So smashing buttons and killing 1,000 guys a fight while basically, fighting through Oda Nobunaga's quest to unify or tear apart Japan, depending on which side you play. So it's based in his historical fact, but it's a real beat 'em up smasher, type game with hidden weapons and lots of collectibles and time trials and stratagems and things like that mixed in. So this game, I think 9 was probably the worst of the series, Dynasty Warriors 9. This game has some of the flaws of 9, but it cleans it up in other ways. But its attempt at a story mode, I think, is kind of interesting because, there is a story, obviously. It's the historical story, but they've tried to do this thing where you just basically follow this one clan through that time period, and time actually advances, and characters will die. So, like, characters will be available for certain battles and not other ones, rather than just kind of how it used to be. There is a free play, but it's kind of hidden almost through another layer of gameplay. You have to actually go to a place to redo battles, and you get to fight side battles here and there, but generally it's just following this one clan's kind of rise and fall. It kind of gets some of its storytelling, I feel like, maybe from a little bit of Game of Thrones kind of style, where we've been betrayed and this and that going on. It's interesting. I think if you're kind of a history buff, the combat is always the same as it's always been. And you lose some of the layers of customization, I feel like. But I feel like you can't go wrong in this time, for something that's just literally just, smash X and kill, a wave of enemies and stuff like that and try to beat your time trials and stuff. So I'm not mad that I bought it. I just wonder how much left the series has, because this is, I feel like, their big attempt to kind of do something different with it. I think it's actually not a Samurai Warriors game because it's sold as Spirit of Sonata. So I wonder if it's just their attempt to kind of branch out, but it's not bad. It's not good. I got it on sale for half off, so I'm not totally mad about it, but more of the same.
I love that game a lot.
Yeah.
It's really, I think it actually came out before Dynasty Warriors 9. It was the series, so they released basically a Musu game every year, and that was, I think, 2017's Musu game, or 2018. Like you said, it just follows the one Sonata clan, and so you'll start out as the father, and then the sons are children, and then as the game progresses, the father moves on, and then the children grow up, and then it's about these two brothers who basically kind of go in opposite directions, and you kind of see this tragic story play out. And Yeah, I don't know. It's got a really great, and if you can stick through all the way to the ending, it's got a very kind of like powerful, emotional ending, and I think it's one of the more uh, story-driven and beautifully told Dynasty Warriors type games that I've played. It's really a great game. I loved it a lot.
It's interesting you mentioned like what was released when, because I actually asked that question because I wasn't sure. Steam usually lists like the date that games were published for PC, you know, so it was kind of hard for me to tell which came when. I really wasn't that sure, to be honest with you, about where it came in the order of the games, because like like you've got the Orochi series, you've got the Dynasty, and you've got the Samurai, and it all kind of feels like you're saying like sometimes you get one or another, and certain things do or don't make it into it, but. I do want to get to the end. I actually do enjoy the story. I wouldn't sell it as a game like like a story game. You still got to enjoy the beat 'em up.
Right? Yeah.
The thing
There's,
I think to buy,
there's
but
still grinding to it for sure.
yeah. But I think one of the interesting things I think about it is how they do create a couple. I don't want to say faceless, but kind of like generic characters to kind of carry on some of the story beats when I guess there's like gaps historically. I'm thinking about like I think Kunoichi. I don't know how to say her name, which I think is like just a generic ninja type character. They kind of have her be kind of like a surrogate for the audience through a couple different parts in the game where there's kind of like a gap historically between the eras. So
yeah, she's just kind of like there observing. I mean, you'll play as her, but she really is kind of like the observational one of the story. She's the C-3PO.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was a really smart way to do it because otherwise, like, the clan can't be the only people doing things in Japan, or it'd be kind of Forrest Gumpy. So I do like that they made at least some kind of smart decisions with it. But I do want to finish it. I'm enjoying it. It's just I think if you're in the Dynasty Warriors Musou series, I think this is a good one. If you're not, I don't think it's going to be the one that's going to sell you if you're still looking for story. If you think the story is going to be the difference. But yeah. It's not been a bad $20 purchase, I'll tell you that.
So I'll just confirm release dates. It's actually about 1.5 years older than Dynasty Warriors 9 if you go by the original Japanese release date, but about a year older if you go by the North American release date.
Yeah, thanks. I thought it was something like that. I just couldn't be sure.
Yeah. So Andy, what have you been playing?
So I've been playing. Well, obviously, I got Animal Crossing and Doom because I have no self-control. I've been playing those a lot. But what I was playing before that was the Dragon Ball Z Kakarot game on PlayStation.
The RPG?
I wouldn't really call it an RPG. I mean, it's like an open world adventure game. You level up, but there isn't it's not like you're going from battle to battle like a party or something like that. I'd say it's more like I don't know what's
GTA Dragon Ball.
Yeah, kind of. It's
Assassin's Creed Dragon Ball.
Assassin's Creed.
That's probably better comparison.
Assassin Ball. So what I've been doing is I've been watching the show on Blu-ray. So I'll watch a few episodes of that, and then I'll go in and I'll play the game and play the parts that I just watched. And so it's been kind of this like a parallel seeing of the story, and it's fun. I do enjoy the game. It's I think I've pretty much seen everything that I'm going to see in it. You basically fly around the map, you collect some energy balls, you fight a few bad guys, you do a small quest, and you move on to the next story beat. And that's basically it, over and over and over again. They've got some customization stuff with you can set your special move set. Like you've got 4 slots for special moves, and as the game progresses, you can learn new moves and swap them out. So if you really like the Kamehameha, you can keep that. But if you want to use the energy disc, you can swap those out if you want. So it's a game I think for fans of the anime. But if you aren't, it might be a little boring. I feel like this maybe the way that Kappa feels about that Spirit of Sonata game, where it's just kind of it's fun, but it's not like this is a revolutionary thing. You know what I mean?
It's been kind of a weird revolution, or I don't know about revolution, but there's been a lot of Dragon Ball resurgence in games lately, huh? It seems like there's been 3 or 4 lately. Is there?
Fighter Z was a big one.
The show is 20 years. It's a little over 20 years now. I think it came out in America maybe 22 or 23 years ago. So I think that's why you're seeing a resurgence of it, because there's like that nostalgia for stuff that's about 20 years old.
Yeah. Um, I never got into Dragon Ball for whatever reason. Like I was huge into like Pokemon, Digimon, etc. as a kid, but like Dragon Ball never really got me.
I think the
So it's been
problem,
interesting to see.
yeah, the problem with the show is that it's probably cliched now, but like, they'll spend 10 episodes on one fight, and so
Yeah.
just watching this. If I was a kid watching this in 1995 or whatever, I think I would have lost my mind, because it would take a month for an entire battle or two to go through, and I can't imagine waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day to see that and realize that, okay, Goku's 5 days away, but in episode time that's like 15 episodes away. So it's just like, God, I can't.
I wonder
Like,
if like
you know,
maybe the resurgence has to do with streaming or like
I
binging.
think
Then
so,
you know what I mean?
because
Like,
yeah, you can easily watch it now. They have on the Blu-ray, they have a thing called marathon mode, where it will skip the opening credits, the end credits, and the last time on Dragon Ball Z part. Like, and it just plays the show. So like this whole 4 hour Blu-ray is done in like three, because they have an hour of bullshit.
Yeah, that'll streamline things. I think the streaming revolution is definitely for binging, especially old, like I shouldn't say repetitive shows, but old shows that don't have episodes where much happens. It seems like more happens when you watch 3 episodes in a row, and it's a
yeah,
little
we
easier to take.
revisited a few of like my favorites with my kids. You know, just like even like little stuff like GI Joe or whatever. Like, man, there is nothing to these things. This is like 5 minutes of actual story or plot or what what I mean, when you actually watch them. It's like everything else is just kind of wow. What was I even into at this as a kid for? So I think that's always kind of interesting to go back and revisit stuff. But I just had been noticing like all this Dragon Ball Z stuff lately. And I guess nostalgia is definitely what's driving lots and lots of reboots. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean,
I
Yeah,
think even the Japanese trailer, it was about like adult men passing on Dragon Ball to their kids. Like that was a selling point in Japan when Kakarot came out.
yeah. And like speaking of nostalgia, Digimon is now doing a reboot series for the original adventure show, which strikes me as so weird.
digital monsters are the champions, though, right?
Yeah, but like Adventure was great, but I don't know why they want to redo it. Like it's not like it's already good. You don't have to make it better. You know what
Oh,
I mean?
I think a lot about like ages, like 'cause I think I'm maybe like 2 or 3 years too old for kind of like that anime resurgence that happened. At least
Yeah.
in the U.S. Because I don't have like those links to like any of those shows like a lot of people I know do. So I think about that a lot. Like I wonder if there's just like kind of a timeline on the nostalgia for some people, but at the same time, if you were outside of that wheelhouse, it just feels weird that this stuff kind of one in a way to me it feels like it never went away, but also at the same time it kind of keeps coming back up. It's a weird like complicated back and forth I guess with it.
For sure. Like as someone who just turned 30, I'm like right in the sweet spot for this nostalgia. But for a lot of other people, if you're a little bit older or a little bit younger, you kind of I don't want to say miss the boat on it, but you're kind of outside the midpoint of where people got really into this stuff.
Yeah, even stuff like Naruto's coming back, and
Yeah,
I don't understand that at all.
I don't know anything about I don't know anything about Boruto's dad. Sorry, okay. We'll never stop making that joke. Scott, how are you dealing with being holed up game wise?
Pretty well. I got a Switch somewhat recently, so I've kind of been digging through some of the like Switch exclusive or more Switch focused titles like Cadence of Hyrule, and I play Overcooked with my son sometimes. But lately, what's it called? Octopath Traveler has really gotten its hooks in me. Which
Ooh,
kind of
yeah.
surprised me because like I kind of got out of JRPGs, like or turn-based RPGs, whatever you want to call them. Like around like I think Final Fantasy IX was about the last one I really played hard. So I was kind of suspicious. I was reading a lot of reviews, and I was like, it seems like it's pretty good. I don't know if I'm gonna like it. And then I found out there was a free demo, and I played it, and I was like, oh yeah, this needs to happen more.
I think I've probably been the highest on the Gravely / Octopath series out of anybody, and like just like you, I hadn't played a JRPG in a long time. And man, did those games really just fill it for me. Like I enjoyed Octopath start to finish. And I know a lot of people are like, well, is this worth playing and replaying? And I would say, yeah, it's one of the few games that I think I would want to see every little bit of it. I think a lot of people tend to skip that prologue part, and I wouldn't even do that. I like the games totally. I wish that I could have played it again. That's how much I like it. But once you know some of the story beats and stuff, it's hard. But I think it's a perfect JRPG start to finish. Honestly, I wish more people would talk about it, because I hear people getting excited for stuff like Final Fantasy VII reboot, and I'm like, you got something right here that maybe you shouldn't be looking past while it's here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that it was really like it was sort of like a refinement or a distillation of like what had been going on with the genre for a while. But it's by no means flawless. I think there's some characters that are not as there's some, I feel like there's some mandatory characters and some kind of optional like characters that are like, I'm trying to find out like what you're good at, and I don't quite get you yet. And then like you dig into their I forget the skills, like you dig into the skills that they can pass to other characters, and you're like, oh, so I see. You turn on your Diablo brain, and you're like, okay, so when I combine these two, I'm super powered now, and I will steamroll anything.
You almost create like an unkillable combination. That was some of my favorite moments, and like maybe things like Tactics, Final Fantasy Tactics, or games like that, where you can literally build yourself to godhood if you want to put the effort into it. Some of that got removed from different games for different reasons, but to me that was always a really high moment.
Yeah, I think like I think removing sort of those like in the games industry we usually call those degenerate strategies, where it's so powerful you feel like you're missing out if you don't do it, and you're sort of forced into playing in a way you don't want to play, which is why they're removed a lot of the times. But for me, like part of that hunt is great, and like that was the end game for me. That was like finding like I mentioned Diablo 3, like going to that and being like, okay, I'm going to combine this certain thing in a certain way, and I'm just going to like have my victory lap across the world after I spent all this time getting all this gear just the way I wanted.
Yeah, I've always appreciated games that'll allow you to do that. Like I mentioned, Final Fantasy Tactics. Like there was that trap that would de-level you in the desert, and if you wanted to, you could go step on that thing 99 times in a row and be a level 1 with all your perks and abilities, and just level yourself right back up to 99, and create. But you had to put in the effort. Well, I don't know effort, but time at least. So I mean, I think these days we talk a lot about meta in games. Like this is the preferred meta, or this is what works in a MOBA or a shooter game or stuff like that. But I think it's always been there, and people are always going to choose that path of least resistance. But I'm glad that RPGs will still build in that path of, if you want to devote all this time and do all this to it, you can get to a point where you're unstoppable. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I wish more people would allow for it, rather than, you see a lot of artificial barriers sometimes to that kind of stuff. And I think that all those barriers are removed in the Bravely series of games. They just let you do what you want.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it. I haven't tried it, but I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I like games that give you the opportunity to just break them. Like they'll I shouldn't say exactly warn you that you'll break the game, but they'll give you the opportunity to kind of break them, and whether or not you wanna break them is up to you. Like the re-released version of Toge Mirage Sessions on Switch, which I'm playing right now, there's a dungeon that'll just give you items that will literally just level you up.
Yeah.
So it's like I can cut down on a lot of grind if I just do this over and over and over again.
Well, like with Bravely, I think I mentioned this before. I really like how they'll let you grind, but then you can turn on and off the grind at the same time. Yeah. I thought that was just a genius move. I'm like, I can't believe nobody's done this before, for one. But I mean, go to an area where you're optimized and your characters can kick ass and grind there, and not, and then in a part where your characters are a little bit weaker, you just turn it off. I think that was a really smart way to do it. I think, there was Moogle charms and stuff like that before, so they didn't exactly come up with that concept, but the ability to turn it on and off on the fly, I think was a really cool way to kind of, work with the players and say, okay, well, you guys do what you want here. And whatever works for you, we'll let it happen, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we've been playing or plan to play to deal with being in isolation. So let's move on now to the reason we brought our special guest, Scott LaGrasta, to come speak to us today. We'd just like to get some of his thoughts on game development and kind of go through his history in the industry and learn a little bit about what it's like to make games. So, Scott, you've been in the games industry for a while, correct?
Yeah, I was doing the math a little while ago, and it's getting close to 20 years. I think it might be like 17, 18 years.
Oh, wow. It's been quite a while.
It's been a ride.
Yeah, and I was reading the interview that you did with Andy on the Avocado about all the different things you've done, and it's a lot to have done in a 17 or 18 year career.
Yeah, I probably glossed over some of it at one point or another. Like I've done a little bit of not quite a little bit of everything, but yeah, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of fun things.
So you got your start in Q&A, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So how's it like in the trenches?
Well, yeah, I mean, so the information from this era is a bit old, but yeah, I mean, this was, to put it in sort of I guess gamer terms, this was like PS2 era. So I was doing testing on PS2 games, and it was, I don't know. I mean, everyone always brings up Grandma's Boy as the touchstone for the games industry, and I feel like that movie must have been made by somebody who had experience in QA, because the sort of upper, the more development and side of it is not, it's exaggerated, of course, but like a lot of the QC stuff, there are some really true notes in there about like the sort of the camaraderie and the memes and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's weird. I don't know. It is fun, but it is still a job. You do have to perform. And I was fortunate enough that I was in sort of a smaller company at the time, where we weren't being pushed by numbers, and we weren't these faceless people. Like, the developers talked to us on a regular basis, and so, like, yeah, I mean, if you want to sort of reproduce that experience, it's like, go to your your local GameStop or whatever, go to their bargain bin and just shuffle through and grab a game randomly and pop it open, throw it into your console, pick a level at random, and then play that level for 8 hours that day, and then the next day and the next day and the next day for about a month, and then you'll have the QA experience.
So it's something that can be pretty repetitive at times, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's well, it really depends on the game and the role and all that. Like, I have friends who like had to test like SingStar, and things like that, where they're like, they're in the QA pit just like singing into a microphone, and of course that's, maybe they're not good at it, and everyone's got to hear it. But yeah, I mean, I was pretty fortunate in that I only ended up testing like 2 or 3 games, and most of what I did on the first title that I tested was like sprinting through the game, basically getting through as fast as possible. So I didn't get a whole lot of that repetitiveness, but some people also really dug the repetitiveness, and it was really great to have people like that on the team, because there'd be this
kind of zone out to it.
Yeah, or not even, is either zone out or like hyper focus, right? Because there's some tasks.
Yeah.
Some tasks you're like, okay, I just gotta go through this and check this and check this and check this. But then other times, one of the devs comes over and they're like, hey, we have this low repro bug. Can you, it involves like, pulling out a memory card at just the right time or whatever during a save. And they'll give it to, to a certain person they know who just really jives on that. And they'll sit there and they'll just get down and they'll like pull it out. They'll get a stopwatch and they'll pull it. And they'll do that for an hour, and they'll come back with like a list of like, okay, I ran into the most faults between these time frames, and it's like, okay, great, thanks. So it really does take all kinds of people. You need, because I'm not actually good at games. Like, people kind of have the misconception that QA people have got to be gamer gods, and that is 1000% not true in my case. Like, you need to see those failure cases. You need to see interesting failure cases, and you need to see all the like the weird breakages that can come from somebody who's trying their best but doing very poor.
Yeah, you need to kind of get what the typical gamer might do, but also the edge cases. You kind of
Yeah,
need to cover the whole spectrum.
exactly.
So one thing I'm actually interested in is what's the purpose of getting people to speed run the game quickly for testing? Is it just to kind of get a sense of where bugs might be over the course of the whole game, or what's actually being accomplished there?
I mean, it depends on. I mean, it depends on the game, of course. But in my case, it was basically to like sort of A to B golden path. Like, is the game completable right now? Is this a build that we should test further? Um,
Oh, okay.
so, but yeah, but there are. I mean, there are in more modern QC departments. We definitely have people that focus on just getting from A to B as quick as possible, and they're able to find sort of the sort of breakages that if you're into like watching speedrunners or GDQ or things like that, that
Absolutely.
yeah, the things that people like use to break the game and get higher speeds, these are the things that people will find, and then if they're if they're bad or need to be patched out, then they'll get patched out.
Funny story
So it's the
about
kind of
that.
thing where you patch out the things that people are kind of likely to run into, but you wouldn't prioritize like a really obscure bug that doesn't really break the game. Is
Oh
that
no,
kind of how
absolutely
it
not. I
works?
mean, like every game ships with bugs. That is
Yeah.
a fact of development. The question is just how many, how bad, and how frequent. And you do sort of like you mentioned one. I think he's gone now, but the other guy who said he was an insurance adjuster. Like we do
Yeah.
sort of do that thing where you say, okay, how bad is this bug? How many people are likely to encounter it? And I've definitely looked at back when I was doing level design, I'd be like, okay, well, there's this bug that hits 1% of people, and then you go, okay, well, this game might be played by 2 million people. What is 1% of that, and how sad are they going to be? And so you're like, oh, okay, I guess I got to fix this.
Yeah. So you're kind of triaging
Absolutely.
the bugs as you go through. So then you say after QA you got into level design, or what kind of happened in between?
Yeah, so I did like a little. My path into design was actually by way of audio. I did audio scripting on the game Dark Watch, which was an interesting experience. We were doing like Lua scripting, the programming language Lua, and I was a little bored at what I was doing because it was pretty simple, but I was excited to not be doing I was excited to be sort of moving up to more designery kind of work. But it was a lot of like, okay, well, when you hit this trigger, play the sound and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to do a wheelie. I wanted to impress people, so I started talking to the audio engineers, and I was like, okay, well, what kind of stuff would you like to do that you can't do? And I would listen to them, and they'd be like, okay, well, we'd like to do this, and I would say, well, that's not possible. That I don't think I can do with my skills, but oh, I think I can do something like this. Let me, give me some time to figure it out. And so that was sort of I was able to construct this system of this is going to sound kind of rudimentary now, but like making sounds feel like they were moving around you. At the time, that was impressive.
Yeah, that's something that I can only really recall in games, like maybe going back 10, 15 years when that really started being a thing in games.
Yeah, like our engine had like positional 3D audio, but it was due to limitations at the time. It was the sounds that were 3D were at the time had to be stationary, and I was able to find a way to basically put them on little splines and have them move past you, so that if you're going through a tunnel, I could make it sound like they were like it was Dark Watch is a spooky game, so like you could sound like there were like whispers kind of going past you, and they seemed to enjoy that, so it was cool.
Yeah, that is really cool, and I think audio is a part of the game that gamers sometimes kind of take for granted, and you'll really only notice it when there's something off about it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So you worked on audio scripting, then you got into level design.
Yep.
So what kind of what kind of skills did you take over from the audio scripting into level design? Was it kind of like positioning stuff, or what exactly were you taking over in terms of that skill set?
I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of strict transition. The Most of it was just establishing sort of a sense of place and wonder. That was definitely something that I got from the audio lead there. Was that he was really big on crafting an experience and making sure that the player felt like they were where they were, even if that place was impossible to be. And that's sort of the tightrope you have to walk as a level designer, is to make the place, because like regular places are pretty boring, like you can make them fun, but you have to make them fun. Conversely, if you're working in like sort of a fantastical world, like like when I was working on BioShock 2, for example, it needs to be a place that is lived in, that is conceivably exists. It can't just be a box where combat happens or a box where story happens. It has to be a place that people hypothetically have lived. And so you will sort of do these almost layers where you'll think about, okay, like this was BioShock 2, right? So we had BioShock 2, and then we had BioShock 1 preceded that, and then regular life at Rapture preceded that, right? And so it was like you had to sort of filter that lowest level experience of what were people really doing when they lived here, why were they in this place, and then what happened after it went bad, and then why are you here now? And that was a big challenge, because you'd go through and be like, oh, I'd love for this room to be this shape, and then you'd talk to the artist working on the level, and they'd be like, okay, well, what kind of room is it? And I'm like, I don't know, man. It's just a room. And they're like, no, like, is it like, what's going on? Is it an alleyway? Is it a like, is it a restaurant? Like, what is this box? Why is it here?
And I guess that kind of feeds back into thinking about that kind of feeds back into the level design in a way, right? Like if it's something is set in a restaurant, then the placement of the tables is going to matter, and that's going to matter for cover and stuff like that.
Exactly. And you sort of have to choose your spaces based on whether it's what the space is good for, really, at that point. If you have a cover shooter, then something inside a restaurant is fine. But if you're doing a game that's third person about freedom of movement, like you have a lot of like motion options, like flying, or like like a Spider-Man kind of thing, it's like, no, don't put me indoors, because indoors is not where the fun happens. Indoors is where restrictions are, in that sort of case. But then you end up with like on the opposite end of that, where it's like, if it's all about really tight corridor combat, you throw me into an open courtyard, and it may not be as fun, because that may not be what the game is sort of intended to do or balanced for.
Hey, Scott. So you mentioned that you kind of have to make these worlds feel lived in and real, but do you ever find a point where it's just like, we have to have cover here, so like you just throw a crate in the middle of the room or something like that? Like, do you ever...
Oh, yeah.
Like, even if it doesn't make sense, like, do you try to find a way to make it make sense, or you're just like, nah, here's a box?
Yeah, no, that's where working with your artist really comes in handy. So it varies from studio to studio, but at the places I've worked at, there's been sort of a level designer has worked with a level artist, and they sort of work together to make sure that the space feels plausible and can be decorated in a way that is meaningful. But yeah, like, there's absolutely the tension between the design of, we really need this here because combat makes it feel better, and the art side of, but there's no reason for that to be there. And so it becomes a discussion, and like this, I guess you call it negotiation, and really workshopping about like, okay, let's, like, as the designer, I'm like, okay, let's pretend this is going to be here. Let's work backwards and be like, okay, how could we have gotten this here? Like, it's like if you need a block in the middle of the street, like that was definitely a big problem on like the Bureau, was we had a lot of like, it was like you're fighting in these 1950s Americana towns with these big, like wide streets, these 1960s or 1950s land yachts would just cruise down, and you're like, that's great, how do I get cover in there? And a lot of times the answer was, okay, well, let's crash a helicopter, like let's wreck this, let's destroy that. But there's always the like, okay, we'll put a box here, and then we'll talk about how it could have gotten there, and then you talk to the artist, and they're like, okay, well, let's put some stuff here to imply that that it has a story, like we call environmental storytelling, where it's like the environment tells you the story of what the things are doing there. You put a crashed helicopter, that's not that exciting, but like you put a crashed helicopter, and then like you put the pilot has like you put a pilot body in there and a very specific wound, and you're like, okay, oh, he got shot by the aliens, and then you get close to the helicopter, the aliens hop out of the helicopter. So it's like, I see that he was, the aliens stowed away in the helicopter, and they shot the pilot, and then it crashed, and they jumped out. There's these stories that can either be something that you intentionally put in there, or that if you do a good enough job of telling the story elsewhere, players will fill in the gaps themselves and give you a lot of credit for ideas you never had, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that seems like almost like taking a limitation and then making something better out of it.
Yeah, like limitations are super important. I mean, they're absolutely frustrating, but I feel like that's when you do your best work. Like, you give me a blank sheet of paper, or like the worst is having like just opening the editor and then having them say, all right, make a level, and you're like, poof, I got all this.
Like,
I have this
under
infinity
what
stretching.
parameters?
Yeah, exactly. But if they're like, okay, it's a movie theater, then like, all right, great, okay, what's in a movie theater? What's where would have I always wanted to go in a movie theater that I'm not allowed to go? Like those sorts of things.
I've always wanted to go to the projection room, but I don't think there's much going on in there.
Andy, is it good or not?
Projection booths are scary places, man. That's a good place for like Resident Evil to go.
Well, keep it in mind for Resident Evil 8.
Yeah.
So on that note, you've dealt with a lot of limitations, like either parameters given to you by your supervisors or other people working on the game, or probably hardware limitations as well. What are some ways you've dealt with those limitations?
Let me see if I can think of something specific.
Doesn't have to be specific. It can be just like general strategies.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends on it's definitely a case by case basis, and like what it's sort of a lock and key thing, like a specific constraint will sort of have a specific result that follows from it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This isn't my example, but the fog in the original Silent Hill, that was a rendering limitation. Like they wanted to have a level of a certain visual fidelity level that they couldn't afford to show at distance, and so they were like, all right, fine, let's bring the fog in and make the town spooky. And so they were able to render fewer polygons and have a super cheap depth fog. It's really cheap effect. They were able to get that.
Yeah, that's a famous one.
Yeah,
and it's also a really clever one that kind of kills two birds with one stone. Like if you work with limitations on, say, I don't know, the amount RAM limitations that would limit, say, the size of how much you can have loaded at once and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time, stuff like RAM limitations, those are generally somewhat hard. Newer systems, we're able to stream that in and out, but then that's sort of a question of time. There's definitely been times when I've been on a level, and especially if you go from inside to outside, or some or kind of different themed areas, then you can really run into memory swapping problems where you've only got so many people you can have in RAM. So actually, now that I'm thinking about one example is in BioShock 2, we had the concept of we called it dream space, where you would sort of flash back to the previous the glory days of Rapture in this given area, and then you would sort of flash back and be in the original version of it, or sorry, not in the destroyed version of it. And originally we wanted to have combat in that space where you had all these wonderful opulent looking splicers back in the sort of glorious looking Rapture day, but we just weren't able to due to we couldn't hold that many different characters in memory, and we also couldn't switch between them that quickly. There's that sort of context switch where unless you can hold everything you need in RAM at once, you're gonna have to swap it out, and then you're relying on in modern consoles, you're relying a lot on hard drive speed or PCs, but on older consoles, it's just PS2, you're coming straight off the disc, and that disc speed is not consistent. If your drive is old or dirty, then you're going to get stuff loading slower, and it's going to materially impact the experience.
So it's interesting you mention having characters in two different versions of the world that swap back and forth, because like on newer consoles, like we've seen this in Titanfall 2 and we've seen this in Dishonored 2. They've been able to kind of pull that off because of I'm guessing the loosened hardware limitations. So it's interesting that we can see like as hardware develops, it does have like a measurable impact on what you can and can't do in a game, which I think is kind of neat. Like people always say, oh, all you're getting with a new console is fancier graphics and things look a little shinier, but they're actual like material gameplay consequences, which I think is neat. So you've worked on like a whole bunch of crazy solutions and interesting parts of games. Is there anything that you've worked on that you feel like particularly proud of?
Yeah, there's this one bug. I bring this up in all the like every time I'm in like a job interview, where they ask like, oh, what's a good bug you fixed? And one of my favorites was this one that happened on the MMO Defiance, which was.
Oh, I've played that.
Have you? Oh, all right, that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't think I've talked to anybody who's played it. But yeah, I came on to help that out, sort of right as they were transitioning to free to play. And so that was an interesting time to be there. But they had this one bug that was just they just couldn't get rid of. Where if you were driving around, you hop in your car, you have this really cool time driving over physics terrain. It was like super cool. But then every now and then, randomly, you get kicked out of your car, and nobody could figure out why. Like this bug had been, near as I could tell, it had been in the game since it started. And it has sort of been the bug that had gotten passed around from like developer to developer, where they're like, nobody has any idea why this is happening. Like, give it to the next person, give it to the next person. And so finally, I was the new guy. It came to me. They were like, "Hey Scott, go try and figure out this bug. Like, you've got some extra time. Like, don't worry if you don't figure it out. Nobody's been able to figure it out. All right, fine. So I'll just take a crack at it." And so, like as is standard practice when you're developing, online games, you've got your computer is usually running you've got your Visual Studio running the code, and then that's probably running like a client, and then also the server, and then however many other servers the particular sort of infrastructure needs. So you're running all these things, and you're throwing breakpoints into the code and saying like, okay, well, if this happens, I want to stop and examine the memory and figure out what's going on and check out the stack and see where I came from and how I got to what I'm doing. So I was trying to figure out where to even begin, and so I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna look at the vehicle code and see whatever causes you to leave. And the code was nicely organized, and so I was like, okay, well, there's this one sort of entry point into the code that gets you out of the car, and it comes from two different places. One was if the player presses a button to exit the car, seems fair, should do that, and the other one was a getting stuck check. So basically, if you rolled your car up into a position where it believed it was on the ground, but the wheels were not, and it was not moving, then it would trigger an ejection. And I was like, okay, well, that seems fair too. And I really couldn't figure out where the sort of forced exit was coming from, until I basically just stepped line by line through the code. Like I sat down and I was slowly scrolling, looking at each line. Okay, do I understand this? What are its ramifications? What knock-on effects could it have? Just line by line by line, until I noticed that the effect that was checking to see if somebody was stuck wasn't just operating on the player that was running the code. It was running on all the what we call network proxies. So your vision of what the other players are doing. And I was like,
oh, so anyone in your line of sight, if they got stuck, it would apply to you?
No, the other way around actually. So if you're running around and you see somebody that was stuck, it would force them to eject their car or get ejected from their car. And I kind of skipped over that because I'm like, well, yeah, it doesn't matter. They will already have been, kicked out by,
ejected,
by their own sort of version of of that client running, so it should be fine. But then I started thinking, okay, well, it should be fine. What are the edge cases for that? What are some anomalous outliers and things like that? And then one thing that you need to keep in mind with every online activity, of course, is latency and lag, and how does the game react to lag? and so I was thinking, I was thinking, okay, well, what's this going to do? So I used a program called Clumsy, which allows you to induce lag into network traffic and like drop packets and all that kind of stuff. I fired that up and was able to induce network lag, and discovered that the code to kick somebody out of your car, that would function on their network proxies if your latency was bad, that their updates weren't coming in quickly enough.
So it would like appear that they were stuck because
exactly
of the lag.
Yeah. So
okay.
yeah. So and at first I thought it was just going to be like if somebody else was like, oh, if I'm lagging, then maybe I'll drop out. But then I realized that it affects the proxies, and if the proxies don't receive an update, they won't be moving. They will seem to be stuck, and I, as a player, will send a network message to the server that says, hey, yo, these people aren't moving, kick them out of their cars, and they will all get kicked out of their cars. And so, yeah, that ended up being, I was able to put in some checks that say, hey, let's only let the player kick themselves out of their own car instead of kicking out anyone who is, on the server or within their vicinity.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting, like, the sequence of events that they use. Like, it's almost like you're a detective.
Oh, it totally is like
through all
detective work. Yeah.
all the possible scenarios that could give rise to this, and then you kind of eliminate them one by one. The most interesting part of the story for me is that you have a program to induce network lag.
Oh yeah, we get all kinds of fun toys.
Yeah, are there any other like tools like that to kind of simulate less than ideal hardware or software environments? Do you guys have other tools that you work with to do that?
Yeah, I mean, hold on, let me do a quick mental check because some of this stuff is like NDA'd. But yeah, I mean, like Clumsy is a publicly available program. I think it might even be like freeware or shareware, or not shareware, that's an old term, but like open source.
Okay.
But that's like really good. You can induce a lot of latency. But yeah, there are definitely developer tools for like disk-based hardware to say like, okay, what happens if the disk is dirty or slow? You can sort of modify modify the rate of transfer and say like, okay, let's simulate a sufficiently dirty disk that, or sufficiently like old hard drive. We can see things like what order are things being drawn on the screen in, and like say, okay, well, why is this? If I turn this way, it goes really slowly. Why is that? Okay, well, let's check the visual, the shader debugger or whatever, and check for a ton of shader instructions or overlapping transparencies or any number of other things that can cause your standard frame drops.
And I guess when it comes to testing for like PC games, do you test on like a range of different hardware, or do you like simulate different hardware?
I don't have a whole lot of experience with the PC testing side. I know.
Oh, you mostly did console testing?
Yeah, when I was in QC, I certainly did console stuff. And then of course, as developers, we have our developer sheets that we work on. But I know that there are QC houses that are basically that just have just huge amounts of PCs that they will like swap parts out on and test. I know I've got some indie friends that have paid for testing to be done on PC because like no indie developer can afford to have like several PCs with all these different ranges of video cards of varying ages and all these different like hard drives and processors and chipsets and all that sort of stuff. So usually I shouldn't say usually, but I do know that PC testing does get compatibility testing, they call it, gets farmed out to other places.
That's super interesting that you have like all these tools and then all this hardware that you use to kind of make sure everything's working right. I think it's one of those things that gamers don't like think about too much. Like they know that QC happens, but it's one of those things that I think they kind of don't really reflect on too much when thinking about what exactly goes into testing and making sure everything's working smoothly.
Yeah, man. Like every game that comes out is a miracle. Like it is. It's like even bad games are hard to make. And it's just so it's every time any game comes out, it's amazing. And like honestly, like I know a lot of people are like, I've definitely heard the concept like, oh, well, this game is buggy, like QC really didn't catch this bug, and I'm like, no, QC caught it. Like QC caught it, and then either somebody wasn't able to fix it in time, or they just flat out decided it was not an important bug to fix, or it wasn't worth the time to fix. Like any QC department worth of salt is going to catch a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Has there ever been a bug that you know of the QC, because it was so rare, it wasn't in the testing environment, the QC like didn't catch and like just caught them flat-footed?
Well, I mean,
Like I know it probably
everything that you
happens once or twice.
I mean, everything that you ship with is ostensibly a bug, is potentially a bug like that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to say about like whether or not a particular environment will catch QC flat-footed or not. Like honestly, it is usually the other way around, where
Yeah.
you're like, my code is bulletproof, ha ha ha, I'm gonna go take it easy because this is perfect, and then QC is like, hey, here's 100%
Nope.
crash, and you're just like, no,
Yeah.
but I'm flawless.
Yeah, I can imagine that probably happens a lot, and you have to spare a lot of developers' feelings when you tell them they messed up somewhere.
Yeah, it's not easy, and I think part of being a part of being a developer is like QC is so important. Like and I feel like they definitely get a lot of crap for I don't know, for everything, not being technical enough or whatever. But they are such a valuable tool, and like if you're nice to QC, they will find bugs in your stuff, and they will help you out, and they will help you get repro cases for your bugs, which is important.
Yeah, because you not only need to know it exists, you need to know how exactly to induce it.
Yeah, definitely.
So on that note, are there any other myths you'd like to dispel about game development, or things you think gamers should know about game development that they don't seem to know?
I think like the biggest myth is that any part of it is easy. I mean, it's true that anybody can do it, but that's just like, whatever. Anybody can ride a skateboard. It's a skill you develop and hone and a craft.
Yeah.
But no part of it is easy. Like QC is not easy. Like production is not easy. Like design is not easy. Like, like design is hard because there's no firm, boundaries. And then programming is hard because there's all these firm boundaries. And so it's like everything is hard in its own way. And it's like anybody who thinks that any aspect of it is easy they should try. They should try and make a game. And I think I've never met a developer who said something was easy. I've met plenty of non-developers or consumers who were like, "Oh, this is easy. It should be a snap to do this." And it's like, no, it's like there's a lot of reasons why it isn't. And sometimes you don't even have the sort of common ground to explain why something is difficult or why it's not possible is blocked behind an NDA that you can't talk about. Like there's definitely plenty of times when I've seen people saying, "Oh, well, they should have done this or done that," and I was like, yeah, like we tried that, but this particular
It didn't work for like X reason.
yeah, well, and sometimes that is like we were not allowed to do that. Like I will not name any projects, but we have like projects I've worked on in the past at other companies and my current employer have had agreements with what features will go into which SKU. So it's like, okay, this vendor gets this feature and this other vendor gets a different feature, and we're not allowed contractually to put the two of them in there. Even though they might even actually be on the disk, we have to disable the ability to access them because we promised we would. And so there's some weird business stuff that can happen, but I feel like that's kind of going away these days.
Yeah, and like I think especially gamers tend to think like they tend to kind of not think too much about the business side of things, so don't realize that there are all sorts of contracts kind of underwriting everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And like they only seem to think about like the things that they think of as effortful are like coding and art, right? And they don't really think about like all the production, design, and marketing and everything else that goes into making a game a success. But like as you say, I'm sure it's all like super difficult.
Yeah, I mean, like there's definitely like so I had my own little indie game that Gun Buds that I made, and yeah, like I did everything except I had a good friend of mine do some music for it, and like I had to do it. I I contracted a friend of mine who's experienced in the industry, but like yeah, like I made my own trailer and I made my own terrible art and like all that kind of stuff, and it's like it's hard, and it didn't sell a lot because I didn't promote it because I don't want to do that. Like I want to have fun designs, and I want to sketch little silly things, and I want to write weird systems and code, and then it comes down to the rubber meeting the road of production, getting things done on time, and like marketing and getting people to care about your game. And I didn't want to do it, and the sort of sales suffered as a result. So yeah, I mean, sales and marketing get a lot of flack as well, but they're important. Like, anybody who's doing a job you don't want to do, like, be grateful that they're doing that job.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of thinks like anytime you see an industry from the outside looking in, you kind of see the fun bits, or you pay attention to the fun bits.
Yeah.
And then you don't think about all the other, like, you might even intellectually know that it's really hard work and long hours, but you don't think about all the crap you might have to face, or all the other jobs that you don't want to do that need to get done in order to make it happen.
Yeah.
So last thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's kind of related, is, are there any features that you've worked on in a game that you wish more people had noticed? Now here's your chance to tell the world, or like the 5 people listening to this podcast.
Gosh, let's see. Things, it's tough because like working on games, you sort of have this like, there's this like kind of quantum superposition of the game. Like, the game that ships like is one version of the game, and then as a developer you have this sort of historical memory of what it was like along these stages. And so there have been times when I have been like, oh, check out this part coming up, and then something will happen and I'll be like, oh, do we not ship that? Oh no, I guess that got cut. Like those sorts of like occurrences where you like, I don't remember what the game is really like. I don't remember what shipped. And so it's hard to say like something that has shipped that people haven't noticed. I mean, I told Andy my one good story about the dancers in my BioShock 2 level. And there's a bunch of like little stuff, like when, in Dionysus Park, like and one of the times when the guy teleports away from you, like he leaves his shoe behind. And so like, I did this little thing where, when he teleports, I check that in script and I spawn a shoe and I give it a little physics impulse to throw around. And it's like, I don't know if anybody noticed that. And I don't really, I mean, that was kind of for me to do like a little, haha, I don't want to do this other thing, so I'm going to procrastinate by putting in a silly little thing like this. But
that's like a really neat thing. Like, probably like maybe 1 or 2 people noticed it, but they didn't think of it as something to like, tell everyone about.
Yeah.
So it's not something that's like well publicized, but that's like really cool. Like, there's all these nifty little touches of personality of the various people who worked on a game, like kind of embedded in it, and you don't really, like, even if you notice them, you don't notice them as things that you like go and tell people about.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Like there was this one other one now that I'm thinking about it back again on Defiance, where it comes up a lot because that project was like, it by the time I had got onto it, it had already shipped and the game was done, and so it's just a lot of like, okay, well, what do you want to do to make it better today? And one of the things, I was sort of scrolling through the forums and people were talking about like, oh, it's hard to see this color on that color in the chat windows, and you couldn't change the colors. And I was like, oh yeah, like let me go take a look at that, because I also have a color deficiency. I don't like see all colors too well. And so I set up this particular kind of, this setting with this setting, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes the text really hard to see. And I was like, okay, well, I'll put in colorblind settings so that the chat will become more visible. And so I went through and did a bunch of research on sort of, obviously I could do kind of firsthand research on what I was able to see, but there were plenty of other color deficiencies that I was not able to experience firsthand. But I did a bunch of research on what those were, and I did a couple of mock-ups and posted them in the forums. And I was like, hey, anybody who has any kind of like color issues, like medical or just strictly preferential, like come take a look at these and see what you think. And so I was able to get feedback from them and adjust the colors and put in a setting that was like, okay, if you are experiencing problems with these chat colors, like try these other ones instead. And I feel like that was one of those things that not everyone needed, but I like to think that anybody who saw it was like, oh, I'm glad they're thinking of of these people.
Yeah, it's probably like it's going to help like 10% of male gamers, like 5% of people overall. So that's, probably pretty useful for a big chunk of people who are playing the game. So I guess thank you for putting that in there and
You're welcome.
putting the effort. So last thing before we go, you don't have to say anything. Obviously, it might be covered under NDAs. Is there anything you'd like to tell us about what you're currently working on, or things you've worked on recently?
Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything I can. I mean, and yeah, unfortunately, like the stuff I'm working on currently has not been announced, and I'm really bummed because I'm super excited by the stuff I'm working on and the specific systems I'm working on, because I think it's going to be interesting and new, and so I yeah, I don't know. I hope to be able to give an update at some point about what I'm working on and talk more about it. But that's the kind of thing where the industry has a lot of guarded secrets, and it's a pretty everyone kind of knows everybody else. So if you blab too much about recent stuff, they'll be like, aside from of course GDC talks and whatever, it's a little frowned upon. But maybe in another 10 years, I'll be able to give some candid discussion about what I'm doing today.
Well, I guess we'll keep an eye out for upcoming announcements from Ubisoft, and you'll probably have worked on one of those things.
Possibly.
Yeah. So,
Well, hey,
thank you, Scott, so
quickly,
much.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, Andy,
Do you want to
please
just
go
give a
ahead.
quick like resume or like list of everything that you've kind of worked on and maybe your role in it? Just so
Yeah,
we
sure.
know.
Yeah, just give the sort of Cliff Notes version. Like, yeah, I mean, I have I'm listed on Moby Games, I think. So I think if you want if you can fact check me there. Started off, QC. I did QC QA. It's kind of quality analyst. I worked on Seven Samurai for the PS2, and then Spy Fiction also for the PS2, an early sweary title. And then I think from there I went on to, I was doing audio scripting and a little bit of scripting and systems design for Dark Watch on PS2 and the original Xbox. From there I worked, I did level design on, I forget the exact name of it. I think it was The Bourne Conspiracy. It was based on the Jason Bourne franchise. I did some level design on that. I did level scripting for the first level on after the tutorial level of World in Conflict. From there, let's see, and then Activision had a bunch of layoffs, and I ended up that was when I went up to 2K Marin and did level design for BioShock 2, and then did some level design as well as a little bit of script writing for XCOM, the Bureau Declassified, I should say. Some DLC for that, some DLC for BioShock 2. After that, where did I go from there? So that shut down, and then that's when I kind of started my indie project Gunbuds that came out like 10 years later. After that, I jumped down to Tryon, which is my first. This is when I switched over to engineering. Worked there for a while on Defiance. I loved that place. That was a great place to work. But I had a 3-hour commute each way because I was living in the North Bay of San Francisco and then driving all the way down to Silicon Valley.
Oh wow, yeah, that's quite a commute.
Yeah, did that real quick. Did a little bit of time bouncing around at some sort of mobile / startup kind of things in San Francisco proper. One of those finally shut down, and I ended up doing build engineering for Telltale. Shipped a ton of SKUs there, and then from there, that's what landed me. After that was the move out to Sweden to work for Massive as a gameplay programmer.
Wow, so you've really been kind of all over the map.
Yeah,
in terms of what you've worked on.
Yeah,
it's impressive.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so thank you, Scott, for sharing your history in the industry with us and your thoughts. It's been super cool to get to speak to a game developer and learn a little bit more about this industry that we all benefit from so much in terms of enjoyment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you guys come up with any other questions or whatever, just compile them up, and I'll be happy to come on at a later date.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And to our listeners, if you'd like to keep up to date with the podcast, you can follow us on our website at avocadogamescast.wordpress.com, where we post each episode along with Linkdump to fact check all the nonsense we say. Mostly it's fact checking, I guess, me, Andy, and Kappa. We can trust Scott to talk about the industry. So you can also subscribe to us on iTunes or Google Play Music. Just search for Avocado Gamescast, and make sure to check out the community that spawned this podcast, The Avocado, at the-avocado.org. Again, thanks everyone for chatting with us. This has been really fun. It's been super interesting, and I'm really glad that we got to have this conversation.
Cool, likewise.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, bye.